Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Grand Rounds for the Minnesota Regional Spinal Cord Injury Model Systems, or what we affectionately call MINSCIMS for short. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. MINSCIMS is funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, or NIDILRR, through their Spinal Cord Injury Model System program. The purpose of the SCIMS is to support innovative projects in research in the delivery, demonstration, and evaluation of medical, rehabilitation, vocational, and other services to meet the needs of individuals with spinal cord injuries. Next slide, please. MINSCIMS represents an exciting partnership among the following Minnesota institutions: Courage Kenny Rehabilitation Institute in Minneapolis, the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Regents Hospital in St. Paul, and the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. Next slide. Our community collaborators include the Minnesota Spinal Cord Injury Association, Unite to Fight Paralysis, Get Up, Stand Up to Cure Paralysis, Paralyzed Veterans of America, United Spinal Association, and the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. This system collectively provides a multidisciplinary continuum of care for people with spinal cord injury, including medical, acute care, acute rehabilitation, and post-acute services. My name is Dr. Kimberly Mondin, and I will be the moderator of today's session. I'm an associate professor and the vice chair of research in the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine at the University of Minnesota Medical School, and I'm the project director of the MINSCIMS. Next slide, please. A few housekeeping notes. So the University of Minnesota has organized the CME for today's webinar. You can look in the chat for information on how to record your attendance and claim CME credit for attending within 24 hours of the event. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website. To earn CME credit for today's presentation, please click on the link in the chat. So due to the number of registrants for today's webinar, we've placed phone lines on mute to reduce audio feedback. However, we welcome and encourage audience participation using the Q&A function. If you have technical or logistical questions throughout the webinar, please submit those in the chat to Dan Kelly. And we extend a huge thanks to everybody who works behind the scenes to put these grand rounds and webinars together. Next slide. The title of today's presentation is North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium SCI Research Advocacy Course. And our speakers today are Ian Burkhart and Barry Munro. And these two gentlemen I've gotten to know over the past few years professionally, and I would say have probably, at least I consider you guys friends, have become friends over the past few years. So it's a pleasure to have you here today. So Barry Munro is the director of the Persons with Lived Experience, or PLEX program at the Praxis Spinal Cord Institute. Praxis is a global collaborator in spinal cord injury research, innovation, and care, using SCI knowledge translation to bridge health evidence with real-world delivery. Barry also currently holds the position of treasurer for NASCIC, the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium, which is a community-led organization which has the mission to bring about unified achievements in research, care, cure, and policy by supporting collaborative efforts across the spinal cord injury community. Barry is a lawyer by trade and practiced personal injury law for over 20 years. Barry is a quadriplegic who sustained a spinal cord injury in 1987 and has been an active advocate in SCI research for over 35 years. Ian Burkhart is a C5 complete tetraplegic from a diving accident in 2010. He is the founder of the BCI Pioneers Coalition and the president of the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. After participating in a few clinical trials, he understood the need for engagement of individuals with lived experience from the start of the research process. Ian was the first person in the world to restore movement to a paralyzed limb using BCI neuroprosthetics. He's also the executive director of the Ian Burkhart Foundation, which raises funds for medical equipment for other individuals living with paralysis. His research focuses on amplifying the lived experience of people with disabilities. So welcome to you both, and thank you for presenting. And I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate the nice introduction, and I'd certainly call you a friend as well. So it's a two-way street there. So I'm going to go ahead and start. The work that we're going to be presenting here was supported by the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation. And Barry and I both have no relevant disclosures for this talk. But our spinal cord injury research advocacy course is what we're here to talk about today. But before we get into that, I just want to go through some kind of historical information about SCI engagement as well as NASCIC itself. So the history of SCI research engagement, really in 2016, there was a conference that Praxis held that really kicked off a lot of individuals wanting to not just be participants in research, but actually be advisors in research and making sure that research was done with our, best interests in mind, and making sure that we were able to participate and have that research be really focusing on the topics that we wanted it to be focused on. That led to, in 2018, NASCIC being formed. Also, the IKT guiding principles were formed that same year, and that was something that was very beneficial to the founding of NASCIC, but as well as the research community as far as the best engagement of individuals with lived experience. In 2019, the NIH held a meeting called NIH 2020, a decade of disruption, which was really a big call out or a platform for individuals with lived experience to call out to researchers within the field the importance of lived experience research and making sure that individuals aren't just considered as participants in research, but always considered as active collaborating members of that research. And in 2023, we developed our spinal cord injury research advocacy course, which we have condensed down because we all love acronyms to SCIRAC. So if you hear that throughout the presentation, you'll know what we're talking about. And that was a course to be able to help with the pipeline problem of individuals that have lived experience but may not know a whole lot about the research process. So the beginnings of NASCIC, it was formed in response to that 2016 meeting in Praxis. We had our first meeting in 2017, co-organized, or we kind of just tacked on to the end of the 2017 Working to Walk conference in Miami that was held by the Unite to Fight Paralysis organization. NASCIC itself is formed of community-led organizations, individuals with spinal cord injury, as well as partner organizations and individuals within the spinal cord injury field. And our mission is to bring about unified achievements in research, care, cure, policy by supporting collaborative efforts across the spinal cord injury community. And really, to achieve this mission, we helped identify gaps, communicate resources, and really want to be that conduit of collaboration between the community of individuals living with spinal cord injury and the stakeholders in that field. To do this, we really listened to the community a lot. In 2019, we had a survey where we asked the community as far as what is really important and what themes do they have, or what themes popped up from the challenges that they face daily. We were able to receive 1,800 responses within 37 days, which was fantastic as far as the fact that we were able to get such a quick response from the community and they were really engaged with us listening. And it was mostly showing that, research or individuals with lived experience felt like researchers and clinicians are not currently working together. And so what can we do to improve that? And that led us into the evolution of advocacy. So we worked with the IKT guiding principles, which are listed below, in a way to define tokenism and build capacity within the spinal cord injury field, so that we can have individuals with lived experience be available. So the IKT guiding principles really are to translate meaningful engagement of the right research users throughout the spinal cord injury research process at the right time. And that really starts with engaging early and often. And, what does that really look like in practice as far as how do we get to meaningful engagement? It's not just, one person all the time who is asked to participate and be an advocate, but it includes mandates to include multiple people, a way to build partnerships within the community, and then once again, that community to help build more capacity. And that's what really gets to meaningful engagement. And that's where we got to the spinal cord injury research advocacy course. So the current gaps in engagement come from the lack of interest in complex research and the amount of researchers and clinicians understanding how spinal cord injury can engage with each other. But we will go on to our next slide here. And we have information here about how we worked with different individuals to be able to support our organization to develop this course. And then we also developed a way for individuals to meaningfully engage with the course itself. So through that, we so we were able to meet with partner individuals to really help make sure that we're supporting and representing the community in the best way possible. And that came from a list of groups that you can see here on the screen, representatives from large organizations, small organizations, all the way across the continuum. But with this, I will now kind of turn it over to Barry to talk about, what are some more of the benefits of taking the course and how that is beneficial going forward.
Thanks, Ian. Hello, everybody. It's great to see you. I just wanted to just go back a bit and stress something that Ian said earlier, in that building capacity was really the number one goal that we came out of as a starting point of one of NASCIC's first real big items on our agenda to change the way we looked at and understood research. We thought with the data that we received from the survey, we realized that in essence, people with lived experience were on the outside looking in and felt disconnected to all things as part of research in the SCI world. And I mean, it's pretty well a catchphrase, patient engagement. We use that word quite a bit in the industry with pharma, and now the device companies are looking at that, but it's really common sense. At the end of the day, there's no point in producing something or attempting to produce something, investing hundreds of millions of dollars after clinical studies, if you really haven't vetted it and discussed the end users with the end users up front in terms of, and really gauge what is it that they want to do. So like the last slide showed, what we did was we embarked on this journey, and frankly, this was a case of the destination wasn't frankly as not as important in some ways as the journey itself, because the journey created frankly a coalition of our community with all the same interests to looking at how can we be more involved and impact research to benefit ourselves with people with lived experience. And that's really what came out of this. And it was a great opportunity. I was very fortunate to be in the middle of all that. And as we started our program and started putting together the game plan, which took about 2 to 2.5 years to build this course, that it was always exciting. We'd have these monthly meetings that I would chair, and you saw the list earlier of all the people that were involved, different demographics, some injured, some caregivers, as well as people in industry and of course academia. And we had the great opportunity of working with people from different parts of the continent itself. That all said, I'd come in with an agenda, and then we'd throw the agenda out the window within minutes, because some of the ideas that were coming out were so amazing. I felt it was a great learning experience every single time. And quite frankly, it was, what was exciting about it is that we had a chance to really galvanize as a community and work together. So we did that. And what we did, though, the first thing we really did in terms of putting together this program was looking at other models, because we realized that we're not the first to think about this. In fact, spinal cord injury is quite delayed when it comes to creating resources for research and advocacy in our area. I think the first out of the gate were the breast cancer survivors at least 20 years ago, where those people were basically saying, we're raising hundreds of millions of dollars for research, but we're not at the table. We feel like our voice isn't being heard, and we're not influencing how it moves forward. But instead of complaining about it, they took it upon themselves to create a program of sorts where they can build their own capacity and feel comfortable speaking up and sharing their truth. And that's what we did. We really looked around, our friends with MS, Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's. There's all of them had a form of resource that would help their own community in building that sense of advocacy. So we did that, and it was a great experience. And when we did that, we came out with some revelations at the end. Next slide there, please, Ian. Is that we realized that the benefits we can just move the next slide, please. Yeah, the benefits of taking the course is what we set out to do, and we were finding that was really the case at the end, is to increase the knowledge of the research process and current SCI research, so they understand, they have a basis of what's going on. It also increases their knowledge of the biology of an SCI. You'd be surprised of how many people don't understand the mechanism of their injury when they've had an injury. And then more importantly too is the evolution and aging with a spinal cord injury, and looking at the secondary complications that arise. Sometimes it's in the early years, but in more cases it's down the road when you're further along in your journey. And then upon completion of the course, we wanted to make sure that we captured those people in a database who wanted to be captured. And then we could find a way of placing them with a research lab or a researcher and or industry where they are looking for a research advocate with lived experience. But we also wanted to stay connected with them, and in terms of keeping up an idea and getting input on the course itself and learning from what their learnings have been and what's happening in the outside community, so we can make the adjustments necessary. But more importantly, we wanted to take the new knowledge of the course for them. We wanted them to be able to become advocates. We find that with the knowledge behind them, it gave them a basis and frankly confidence to speak their truth, so that they can voice their opinion and share their lived experience in different forums and in different aspects of research, depending on the type of research there is. So that's what we found as a target and actually executed it. And we realized that there's a great benefit for people that take the course with a spinal cord injury. Also, we'll go to the next slide. One thing that we found out more as an after fact is that the benefits for taking the course could really apply to researchers, especially young researchers or people that are new to SCI that needed, frankly, a crash course on SCI research, which they wouldn't normally get. It's all in lay terms, which is fine for somebody starting out. But more importantly, they got to learn about people with spinal cord injury, so they could increase their knowledge of what it means to live with a spinal cord injury. There are many researchers out there that have never met a person with spinal cord injury. And you'd be surprised how some of them have spent almost decades in SCI research and never met a person with a spinal cord injury. And I think this is an example of where they can better understand the activities of daily living and how a day in the life of a spinal cord injury can be impactful. They learned how to design research studies. So by understanding someone's lifestyle and someone with a spinal cord injury, they'll realize that if they're going to design a study, they have to look at their daily living and the barriers that they face so they can accommodate that, so it has a better chance of success. They also learn about other SCI research and how some of this research that they think is novel may not be so. And that way they can either collaborate with the others or move on to a different area. You'd be surprised the amount of duplication of research for young researchers in different parts of the world where they think they're coming up with a novel idea, but frankly, they're just reinventing the wheel. And so this is an opportunity to get a very brief way of scanning over all of this. And then upon completion of the course, another great benefit, much like we said with the people with lived experience, this is a chance for us to connect them with a person with a spinal cord injury who wants to be an advocate. So we create a form of matchmaking, and which is we kind of have fun with that, but it's a great resource for people for researchers that are looking for people with spinal cord injuries to work with on a daily basis or somewhere within their study. And then take the knowledge of this course so they can also share this with their own colleagues and hopefully share the possibility of spreading the word and engaging people with spinal cord injuries who may want to know more about research. We always said that if someone asks, so what's going on in SCI research? Well, take the course. It's as easy as that. You don't have to get into a long, drawn out process of how to explain what's going on in SCI research. It's all there in one way or another. It's all in this course. It might be organized different than someone how they'd like it, but pretty well everything is there in terms of major categories of SCI research and what's going on at the same time. So we think this is a great course for not only people with spinal cord injuries, but also with people with that are involved in SCI research, from clinicians, industry, academia, you name it. It's a great resource all around to understand what's going on and to better understand people with spinal cord injuries. So the next slide. So this is really, I'm just going to go over briefly a review of the modules that are in place. So understand this, that it is a 12 module course. It takes approximately 5.5 to 6 hours to complete. You can do it at your own pace at any time. And in order to advance for each module, you have to complete a quiz, and you have to be successful of a 70% or over to advance to the next module. Now, it's not that hard, frankly, and if you fail on the quiz, you go back again. Normally, you get it outdone in the second try. But the idea is to prove and to show and to actually acknowledge people that are completing the course in its full completion, not skipping through, not jumping ahead. And I heard one friend say, it's not like you can put the course on and then go and prepare a meal and come back in the room. It's not one of those. You have to pay attention and you have to watch. Now, that said, it's all in lay terms. We made it very clear when we were constructing this that it was in lay terms so people can best understand it at a level that is common for most. Some found it hard, some found it too easy, but it's the sort of the sweet spot that we think we've created. So, like I said earlier, we think we've captured everything. How they're categorized might be different for some people, but we wanted to share with you what it looks like. The first module really is Introduction to the Research Advocacy course, as we just spoke about. The second, we talk about understanding the process and the R&D decision makers, because a lot of people don't realize what it takes to take an idea, whether it be a quality of life study, or it could be an outright pharmaceutical treatment, and how it moves through the system from what they call, an IRB approval, and what it takes to get approval to run a study, and then potentially what it takes for regulation, and so on and so forth, bringing you to, for example, an FDA approval of a product. That is something that people don't understand. Now, some of us got a crash course of it during COVID and learning about vaccine approval, but people really benefit from this part because it measures, frankly, their expectations a little bit, and they can understand that things aren't that easy sometimes. The next is we look at the historical challenges of SCI studies. That one's interesting because what people don't realize is the heterogeneity of people with spinal cord injuries. Every spinal cord injury is different. Even the same level of injury can be different, where it's almost like I heard it equated to like a snowflake or a fingerprint. Very different. So when you're trying to put together a cohort, it's not as easy as one thinks when they're putting a study together because of the various variables. Many of you researchers that are listening clearly understand what I'm talking about, but the community itself sometimes doesn't understand that, and so this is where we address that issue. Module 4 is probably one of my favorite ones because this is what I talked about earlier. It deals with the biology of the injury, so it's really looking at what happened. Why is it that I broke my neck or I broke my back? I've had this spinal cord injury, and it just doesn't get better like it does, like a peripheral nerve could regrow. Why is that? And we walk through all of that and look at the causes of the loss of function and frankly, and sensation, and what that all means. We try to break it down and map it a little bit. We try to identify the various parts of it, which get which are really the subject for research down the road, but we really try to keep it in lay terms as well. And so it's that module in itself should be mandatory for everybody that has an injury, just to know what's happened to themselves. And it's where we discuss what ASIA A and ASIA B means, what an NSCI study is. I mean, these are things that the average person just sometimes doesn't even know with a spinal cord injury. So we think it's important that we address it there. And then module 5 is really an extension of that, but it's really aging with spinal cord injury, looking at secondary complications. So we look at the evolution of all the different mechanisms and the autonomic nervous system and how it's affected: bowel, bladder, skin, pain, sexual function, mobility. All of these things get addressed, but more about how they evolve down the road and how they could change with aging. In some ways, this is a really important module that if someone saw this in the first couple of months out of their injury, they could actually take preventative steps to avoid some of the long-term complications of secondary complications. So meaning looking at really taking care of your skin and what you do that way. Obviously, what you do with your bladder and your bowel care, nutrition, how to avoid obesity and some of the things that go with that. Some of the cardiac problems that could be affected that we're learning more about for long-term studies on spinal cord injury. So again, this is where we attempt to look at that. The next 4 modules are really what I call the neuroscience modules. This is the hardcore SCI research stuff. So the first one we identify as cell replacement for what we call as neuroprotection. This is at the outset and acute treatments of people with a spinal cord injury, almost in the early days of the injury, early hours of the industry, of the injury itself. So if you go on to the next slide there, Ian, we then deal with axon growth and looking at how we can not inhibit, but get rid of the inhibitors and try to teach a way of the way for our axons to regrow, which is the paramount problem people have, but mainly at the acute stage. Then we get into the bigger area of neural repair or neural regeneration. That's a very all-encompassing piece. And for example, we talk about stem cells and other forms of neural repair, more in the chronic condition. And these are what we do is we identify these major areas of where research is existing right now. And so people have a better understanding of the landscape of research in these neurosciences piece. And the last neuroscience one that I like to consider called neuroplasticity. It's looking at all what's happening on now. It looks as far as activity-based therapy, right through to brain interface, looking at epidural stimulation. All the things are quite actually front and foremost on the news right now. But these are areas all related to neuroplasticity that we have attempted to really canvas and really summarize the great work that's been done. I should add that every module that we've completed and written was done so by a committee that you saw earlier of about 15 to 19 people. But each module had its own subcommittee of experts, scientists, as well as people with lived experience, working together to identify what it is that they wanted to do, and that way we can get through all that part as well, and so that we can really try to capture the questions that are being asked. The module 10, that's a whole other area outside of the science, is really outside of the neuroscience, but looking at quality of life research. What people don't realize is that the majority of research in SCI is around quality of life itself. So dealing with things like nutrition, psychosocial things, mobility in terms of better engineering on wheelchairs. These are the kind of things that we needed to gauge, but more importantly, are very important to today, the here and now of people with spinal cord injury, and frankly, improving their quality of life. The module 11, that was designed specifically for researchers, because that's where we looked at a day in the life of spinal cord injury. And basically, it's full of interviews and testimonials. And we're very fortunate to work with our friends at Kessler, who have also designed a training video for caregivers so they can better understand SCI. And so what they've done is they've shared their great video and production with us so we can reshare that with you. And we want to say thank you to them. But in that piece, it gives a researcher who has never met a person with spinal cord injury a good way of understanding what it's like to live with an SCI, but something you don't find in a textbook. realizing that, hey, I want you in the lab at 9 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, my bowel routine doesn't finish till 10. Did you know it takes 2.5 hours? Did you know my caregiver was late today? Did you know, oops, I couldn't get a ride in. I have no way of getting there. These are the kind of things they need to know. And then more importantly, getting into what it's like living with a spinal cord injury, the lack of independence, how you're looked at, confidence. These are really qualitative look of SCI and activity and really daily living and what it's like to live with an SCI. And very important for a snapshot for some of this from a researcher that's coming from left field and has never met a person with SCI. Very important module, and it's a standalone module on its own if it has to be. And then the last module, it's written, our little birds are ready to fly away from the nest, and we want to get them out there in the community. And by doing that, we talk about the various ways they can act as advocates, and then more importantly, how they can get involved and be part of a database that we can share with them and move them out into the community and connect them through a matchmaking program. As well, we advocate other programs that I'll talk about in a bit, but a way of supporting them after the course itself. So that's it in a nutshell, the 12 modules. So if we go on to the next slide, I wanted to be very clear that we're always cognizant of making sure that what we got was right. And we wanted to listen to the community itself. And we were very fortunate to have an ongoing research study that's being conducted on the impact of the course. And our friends at the University of British Columbia, Kelowna campus, Emily Giroux, who's a PhD candidate, has been doing some great work on gauging the community that has taken the course and see what kind of impact they have. And based on that conversation, anecdotal conversation with our own group, and discussing this back to the original working group that put this together, we heard them, and they basically said that it's a great course, but it's not necessarily for everybody. And is there a way that we can sort of break it down and make it shorter, or allow people to do it in pieces, so to speak, or maybe just to tackle one topic that they're particularly interested in? Because they say the resources are there, they're great resources, they've been designed for the lay person, but it might not be the full thing that people want and just want a piece of it. And that's where we came up with the idea of what we call SCI Light. So it's an idea of taking the course and making some more of a lighter load. And if you go to the next slide, I'll explain how we broke down SCI Light. So we put them in bundles. Basically, we took the modules as you see. So one is Basics of SCI Research Advocacy, and it's modules 1, 2, 3, and 10. Then there's SCI Biology, and it's just modules 4 and 5. And then bundle 3 is SCI Research Areas. That's when I talk about the neuroscience-y things, 6, 7, and 8, and 9. And then the last is just an SCI lived experience, which some people just might want to do on their own, and that's module 11. And what we did do with this with SCI Light, and if you go on to the next piece, we basically broke it down in such a way that we give a description on the course and on the bundles on the site. And by doing that, people have an understanding of what it is they want to do. But the good part about it is that it's not a full course, meaning they don't have to take any tests. They literally can put on a Vimeo video and just go through it and listen to it, much like any kind of YouTube type of resource that's out there. But here's the best part, and we're seeing it happen now. People get teased. They take it, they recognize that they've taken it, they move on to do maybe another bundle, and then they just realize, I'm halfway through the course. What if I want to just go back and take the course? And so what they do is, it's recorded that they've at least gone through these parts of the course. They have to go back and take quizzes to confirm that they've taken the modules. But the fact that they've watched half of the course already by video and completed the modules, they're given credit for that. So if you go on to the next slide, you can see how there is also bundle 3 and bundle 4, same thing, description of how the course is taken, and more importantly, their ability to go back and use that as a credit to taking the whole course if they so choose. So there's that option available. We're very excited, though, if we go to the next slide, in that to date, We have over 588 active users and 185 graduates. And I can say right now, on the last look at the data, the graduates themselves, it's almost a 50-50 split, believe it or not, between people with lived experience and researchers, which I found fascinating. It's something we didn't expect. So we're very pleased with the research community and clinicians, how they've taken it on and really embraced the product and have used that. And we're more excited about the fact that you people that are listening to me now have the opportunity to be frontline and ambassadors of the course and share that with other people. And that's when we get into dissemination, because we still think that it's underutilized and it's such a great product that we need to get the word out. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about, we have current methods of dissemination that we've been working on. So we have been obviously actively putting social media posts out there. We do have Facebook, we are on Twitter, we're now on Reddit. And more importantly, we're doing a lot of one-on-one meetings with organizations. So think of many United Spinal chapters, PVA chapters, presentations in front of larger groups, many conferences that we've attended. And in fact, we love speaking to researchers like today, so that you have a better understanding of what it is that we offer in this course, so that you can at least look at it, hopefully fall in love with it, and then want to share that with other people. We're always looking for other opportunities to share this, and we do so all the time. And so we're now embracing the idea of working with influencers to share this course as well, and to spread it amongst our community. And as you know, everything's a shorter and shortest soundbite nowadays. Like, offering a 30 seconds, that's too long. It's got to be, you got to think TikTok, Instagram. It's got to be an in and out, and how we can get to into our population and people that want to could benefit from the course. And the next slide, again, we just summarized. These are the organizations that we've worked with and their conferences, and we've been very blessed to have open arms and people wanting us to attend and speak about our course, including today. And we want to thank you again for this opportunity. But as you can see, we've been even around the world on this and speaking about this program, and we're very excited about it. We've currently right now having subtitles, Spanish and French, and we're working on a full revamp of the course in fluent Spanish and French, so that people hopefully that might be marginalized or doesn't have English as their first language would be more apt to want to take the course that way. But when we get into these conversations and we have these presentations and we make them all the time, something has dawned on us recently, and it's been troubling us back at the NASCIC headquarters, so to speak. And it's really going to the next slide there, Ian. It's the people that aren't at the table. I mean, Ian and Barry, we get out there to these conferences, we get up on stage, we travel around, we have time to do these things. But there are many people, as you know, with spinal cord injury who are not being heard, and they're struggling. They're just trying to survive. And so we need to make sure that we can find a way, and we're working on this all the time, and how we can connect with them. And frankly, the problem we're having, and model centers are having this, and I understand this too, is that there's a lot of great resources out there, but we're having a very hard time of connecting with our community that have gone through our rehab and trauma centers. They go back out in the community, and as we all know, it's a very, very short window when they're with us and they go to the community. Then we lose touch, and this is a problem. So frankly, we don't necessarily have the answer to that. I think in theory, we believe that the peer support system, and no matter how it happens, is very important to have and work with, because that's where it can be delivered by mouth and people can understand, or at least be introduced to what we're doing, as well as any other great products out there. But it's an ongoing issue, and there is no pure exact science on this in terms of how to perfect the perfect dissemination model. And I know there's a lot of great people looking at this and dedicating a lot of their careers to this right now. So we're excited about any outcomes that can come out that could perhaps give us more guidance on how to connect with the community. But we really believe that engaging individuals to become advocates and engaging clinicians will ultimately really help people with lived experience at the end of the day. When we go to the next slide, when I was thinking about this, and when we talk about the pure importance of, I hate using the word, but I'll say patient engagement, but we'd like to say engagement. It's that we get to tell our stories, and we are the experts that you can't underestimate how important it is to listen to somebody that lives with an injury 24/7, 7 days a week, years and decades at a time. They know, they've lived, they've loved, they've lost again. They have their victories, they've had their defeats, but it's their stories that are so important. And I cannot tell clinicians and researchers enough that you need to listen to their stories, because in their stories, there is the potential for solutions to some of these problems that will trigger in the minds of great people like yourselves, people that have dedicated their careers to help people like us. But when they hear their stories, I think that is the part that really turns things and makes a difference. And these solutions can only be found by understanding the individual challenges, and not just, hey, I met Ian, he's a great guy. It's about, I realize what Ian goes through when he travels. I realize what Ian's morning is like. Or, wow, Ian had a bad day. I didn't know that happened to people. Oh my God, somebody should be doing something about that. Yeah, no kidding. So, sorry, Ian, just kind of leaning on you a little bit here. But my point being is, you cannot undervalue the importance of speaking with people with spinal cord injuries and understanding. And really what's more important is understanding their priorities. And, when Ian showed that graph at the beginning there, what people don't realize and understand is that when it comes to our preferences and priorities in research and what we want, mobility is fifth. Bowel, bladder, pain, sexual function, these are all ahead of in the priority scale for people with spinal cord injuries. Yes, we all want to walk again. Yes, we all want to recover something, but more importantly, we need some of these things dealt with sooner than later, because it really impacts our lives, impacts our independence and everything we do. So we always think it's very important, for obvious reasons, that researchers and clinicians listen to the priorities of our community so they can actually have research better reflected that will help these people. And, I can tell you this all you want, and we could talk about the carrot and stick, but some of you already realize that funders are now requiring a person with lived experience to at least be part of your grant application. Can it be tokenistic? Potentially. But the reality is that it's coming, that perhaps one day, most, if not all, funders will require that. And that's why we're out there to help, so we can help build that capacity of advocates, that they can help you conduct your research and, frankly, get the money and grants you need to do so. So it seems like a team effort here, but this is what's gone into, and really the rationale of pushing this from day one. And we're very fortunate. And as Ian said, we've had great people helping us here, as well as the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation for being one of the largest funders of this program. But again, it's taken the folks that have put a lot of hard work into this to make this course a reality. Back to you, Ian.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry. So I just want to close up with a few things that we are working on that are coming soon to be able to enhance, now that we've been able to really engage with the community and build that capacity. So from other feedback we've been able to find, now that we have this larger pool of advocates who are ready to really contribute to different projects and be able to share their lived experience and engage well with the research community in a way that they can really have that impact of, yes, sharing their own lived experience, but also, because they've been able to take the course and meet with other advocates, being able to share the larger sense of what it's like living with a spinal cord injury. So you're not just getting one perspective, you're getting the perspective of a community. So we're working on a matchmaking page right now where we'll be able to, almost like a dating app of being able to bring researchers and advocates together, so that they can work and connect with those research labs, to really form a partnership. And, what we've seen previously is that some of these projects have been just more one-off, and it's like, okay, a funding agency is requiring that we have to have someone with lived experience. So we as researchers will go out and find someone. But I think what's really even more important, and it's really just making us be obsolete, is just to really be able to build those relationships, so that as NASCIC, we don't even have to step in. It's just the researchers already know where they can contact individuals who really want to participate in this type of research from a collaborative process, and really be able to make an impact there. Additionally, we do host workshops now for graduates of the Spinal Cord Injury Research Advocacy course. And that's a way to network and connect these people together, to share what their experience have been like, good, bad, and ugly, all across the board of being an advocate for lived experience in a project. And also figure out, what can we do next to further some advocacy in this space. Additionally, we're collaborating with Unite to Fight Paralysis on their book club that they have, to build in some of this SCI-RAC modules into that book club as a way to, once again, be able to further disseminate the content that we have made and make it much more approachable. Like Barry mentioned, some of the feedback we got is, that's great, but I don't want to sit through a 6-hour course. That's not necessarily what I'm interested in right now, but we've found that, if you can give someone a little bit of a taste of it, they really understand the value that it brings, and they will want to continue on with the course. So that's just another method of dissemination there. But with that, I would just really want to, thank everyone for listening. Barry and I's contact information is below. There's a QR code there to register for the course if you're interested, as well. But I think I'll throw it back to Kim, but I think we're ready for some questions. But Kim, it's yours.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I always enjoy learning about this program and hearing you guys talk about it. One question I have while we wait for other questions to come in, so please feel free to use the Q&A. So if a researcher or a research lab wants to be on that matchmaker page, do they have to have gone through the course?
Not necessarily as a requirement, but we do think it's really beneficial, especially to have the one module of, the lived experience of spinal cord injury. Like Barry said, being able to really fully understand the day in and day out of what it's like living with a spinal cord injury is kind of the base level of what you need to be able to really fully engage with the community.
And then those shorter snippets, Barry, the bundles, how long are those?
They vary. Kim, they're usually, some of the modules too vary as well. Like, for example, that module 11 is almost an hour long, which is the longest of all of them. And that would be a standalone in itself. I think the bundles itself on average would be 90 minutes if you had bundled them together. So it's not too bad.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. So I've worked with some of the people you've collaborated as well, as Barry, at UBC Okanagan. So Dr. Gainforth, who's presented as well on her integrated knowledge translation guiding principles. The interesting thing is, Heather and I have collaborated on some grants to, work with how to, so the IKT guiding principles are out there, but people don't really know how to implement them. So they're putting them in their grant because, great, this sounds like, this great model that I can use to say I'm going to do. And then when you ask people, so how are you doing it? And I speak for myself too with our community advisory board. It's like, there's no real roadmap. There's no toolkit. There's no, it's kind of like this essence, right? And so we submit these grants, but nobody's interested. The funders aren't interested in funding how to make these, principles implementable. So I feel like we're caught in this catch-22 of, involve the community. Great, let's involve the community. We want to know how to do it better, but then they're not supporting us to learn how to do it better. Very frustrating.
That's a good point, Kim. I was thinking about just as you were saying that, and we've had, Ian have had conversations on other matters, but I think it's again, it's incumbent upon us to maybe lead on this a little bit. And because you're right, the frustration is always there. But for example, I want to turn it the other way. You have a funder that requires a person with lived experience to be on your grant. Okay, if you don't do anything else, that just cries for tokenism. It just find that person, you get the call out. So really, what we need to do, like IKT as well, and I think we're going to probably address that going forward, is help, for example, a researcher or someone applying for a grant, a clinician, design an engagement strategy. So it's the strategy, it's the nuts and bolts that gets it. Instead of just getting Ian to come, it's looking at a strategy which would include a budget, a job description, how they would engage, those kind of things. And I think with IKT, we do the same thing. And I know Heather, we keep talking about Heather first name, but anybody listening, she's absolutely great. Their second phase is frankly doing a lot of that and how to fill that in. But you're right, if it's a one-off and a part of a grant proposal to a funder, they don't have the time. So I think together as a community, we're going to figure out how we can lead people to water and make them drink it, that way.
Yeah.
Well,
I see that.
quite frankly,
go ahead.
Yeah, quite frankly, there's, with the funders that are encouraging or requiring individuals with lived experience, that's just a first step there. They don't look at the outcomes of how that improved the quality of the project. They understand that it is good to have individuals with lived experience. But really, once you're able to get advocates that are really well educated and can really contribute highly to that team, the proof is in the pudding as far as the quality of research that will come out of that. And that's where it's something that we can really improve the translation of projects and making sure that, at least from a very small problem that we see a lot is, well, not necessarily that small, but the challenge of recruitment for clinical trials is really hard. And so what can you do by having individuals with lived experience as a part of the research group from the start to make sure that you can remove some of those barriers?
Yeah. I see somebody has their hand raised. Christian has their hand raised. I don't know that. I think you're going to have to put your question in the Q&A because I don't think we can unmute.
While we're waiting for that, I was just going to mention, further to what Ian was saying, that whole point is, it's been proven that by involving people with lived experience in any aspect of research, sooner than later, you can improve the design of the project, which includes ideally capturing the preferences of the community. You get those two things together, the chances for recruitment are much exponentially higher. But if you design a research study that nobody cares about, or it's poorly designed and doesn't reflect the community and their limitations, it's going to fail. And that's the learning for any researcher going forward.
Right. I don't see anything in the Q&A. Christian, I would encourage you to ask your question by email if you can. I know Barry and Ian had their emails up earlier. Do you have that slide handy, Ian? There we go. All right. Oh, there's the question. So somebody asked, when is the appropriate time for someone with an SCI to get engaged with these courses? During inpatient rehab?
Really, I think whenever you're ready for it. There might be a lot going on when you're in inpatient rehab, to where focusing on this might be something that's a little challenging. But if you're interested in research, I mean, whenever. I think, we want to make sure that we have a lot of advocates that can, improve our kind of demographics as far as time since injury. And so I think that is really important to be able to capture some individuals really early on. And I don't think that there's a time that's, too early. You know, it's not like, oh, well, we want to make sure you're at least a year post, because then that's when you become an expert in spinal cord injury. It's like, no, you're an expert just day in and day out living with spinal cord injury, and being able to then really learn the information from this course, I think is very beneficial at any point.
One of the things I think about, and if I was injured in '87, which is, God, it's almost pre-internet. That's a terrible thing to say. But that said, one of the things I do remember is that, first of all, the person that's injured within those first few days, even weeks, are trying to survive and get their head around it. But family members who are rallied to the site, to the rehab center, they're camping out 24/7, who really care about the injured person. They have all this time on their hands, and I always thought this would be a great resource for them to spend their time on while they're sitting there, instead of Googling different studies that may or may not involve something. Because we get the calls at Ian where, hey, you know, my son just injured himself. Do you know any clinical studies that can help him walk again? Like, that's how it comes out. And it's so, you can realize how scary what's in front of them, what they're going through, and you can feel their pain. And I always thought this might be a great way for people to get up to speed, and then even share it with the person that's injured who might not be ready to hear it at the time.
Yeah, and really be educated about what type of research is going on that's out there, and how that research, you know, can affect their loved one.
One thing we've been planning to do in our model systems is, you know, put together like a packet for when people are enrolled that has, you know, resources in it. Do you guys have like a one-pager you can send me or something like that, so we
sure
can get
do.
the information out to people?
Definitely get that.
Thank you guys so much for presenting today, and thank you to everybody for attending over your lunch hour. If you have any remaining questions, please feel free to email Barry or Ian. They're very friendly and we'll answer all of your questions. So the recording for this webinar will, as I mentioned, will be posted on the MnSCIM's website with a link to our YouTube channel. And as a reminder, please see the chat for information on how to obtain CME credit for attending today's webinar. And at the end of the webinar, a brief 3-question survey will pop up. We would really appreciate your feedback. It's asking about what topics are of interest to you so that we can build out our grand rounds going into the future. We'll be taking a brief break from grand rounds over the holidays, and we'll be back probably in, I think, February or March. So thank you to everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.